116. Ghouls having the ability to survive without food, water, or oxygen in a coffin for half a century like they're fucking vampires or something. 117. Ghouls being able to sew their fingers back on. Ghouls are supposed to be falling apart, slowly dying. That's why they're missing their noses. Why would they be able to simply put their fingers back on? And if that's the case, why wouldn't they have put their noses back on? 118. Usually a fella doesn't have to eat a fella. Cannibalism in California was rare, even in Fallout 1. There was one instance of where you found someone was selling human flesh and passing it off as animal meat, but that was more a Soylent Green reference than anything. In Fallout 2, bigots believed tribals were backward savages who indulge in cannibalism, and the player can tell the saloon/funeral home owner in Redding that their tribe were indeed cannibals, to the shock of the civilized bartender. Whether the chosen one is kidding or not is left up to the player. One of the tribes in New Vegas were also said to be cannibals. However, the tribe in question ate human meat more as a delicacy than for sustenance. The idea that Cooper is implying that everyone has to engage in cannibalism to survive is just dross. It's made worse by the fact he's a ghoul. In Fallout 3, the prejudice around ghouls was based on the erroneous presumption that they were like zombies in that they ate human flesh and needed to be shot in the head. This was supposed to be a joke at the bigots' expense, but the writers genuinely took that at face value. 119. The Enclave turrets from Fallout 2 are plasma turrets, not machine guns. When you set off a turret, this doesn't happen. Rather, this does.
You have perished.
120. The sign on said turrets doesn't say, quote, remain calm. That would be idiotic. It says, quote, tampering with it will most likely result in death. The turrets in original Fallout actually had a witty, funny joke on a sign that the writers chose to exchange for something dumb and less funny. Hi, this is the editor, so it just occurred to me that some people in the world don't understand the concept of a joke. This is a conclusion I drew from looking at reactions to the Fallout TV show. So let me explain. The joke behind the remain calm sign on the turret is that it's ironic that a turret shooting at you is telling you to remain calm. That's it. That's the joke. It doesn't make sense in universe because why would anyone put that sign on a turret designed to presumably keep illiterate tribals or literate NCR Rangers and Brotherhood assassins out of your Enclave base? The joke, quote, tampering with it will most likely result in death, is a play on traditional warning signs found on electrical appliances. It's a double meaning. Messing around with it might kill you from an accidental electric shock, but it's also a turret designed to kill you with plasma. It's ironic because the Health and Safety Department of the Enclave put a safety warning on a literal turret. It also implies the genocidal evil faction has a Health and Safety Department, which is funny and also not only possible but highly likely. It implies that at some point, someone looked at the turret designed to fire hot plasma at people and thought it might need a sign to stop people from getting shocked trying to fix it. Then there's even a satirical layer, as the Enclave are literally remnants of the pre-war government and the ruling elite. It's a reference to the hypocrisy of the American government that pretends to value human life while leading the world in devising and mass-producing the most deadliest weapons known to man. It also touches on the frustrating bureaucracy that the American military must constantly deal with. The nonsensical red tape that, for example, prevents soldiers from smoking a cigarette while being taught how to fire an M2 Browning. Which, by the way, is a scenario I can easily picture in the Navarro base, as even 100 years after a nuclear apocalypse, the American military will still be using the M2 Browning, and the US government will still be trying to stop their soldiers from smoking tobacco. Lastly, the meta of the situation is equally ironic, as the player can only read this sign while covertly infiltrating the Enclave base. The developers are breaking the fourth wall by telling the player that obviously footering with a turret will raise some eyebrows and result in alerting the base. They didn't even give you an option to do that, so instead they gave you a sign that basically tells you that you are an idiot. That's what makes this a good joke. To put it basically, for the most part, a good joke gets more funny the more you think about it. A bad joke, in contrast, gets less funny. Therefore, the original joke, whilst being more lore accurate, would have been more funny and taken less effort on behalf of the writers to implement in this adaptation. Therefore, the writers have made an effort to be less funny than the original Fallout, which itself is the best joke these clowns have ever pulled off. 121. I doubt it's that easy to steal important technology from the Enclave. In Fallout 2, your character had to pass multiple security checks to pass themselves off as an Enclave recruit, or try to sneak in without detection, which was far harder. And this was in a relatively new base where security was somewhat lax. Even then, it was very lucky that most presumed the drooling tribal in a vault suit was some kind of lost recruit. Some would even say convenient, but certainly not as convenient as 𝐷𝐞𝐿𝐥𝐥𝐸 just literally stealing the secret to world domination and walking out of there with his dog like he was going on vacation. 122. Cold fusion isn't a new invention in the Fallout franchise. The writers probably thought they were clever in inventing it for the show, but small cold fusion reactors have existed in the canon since Fallout 2. In fact, this isn't even the first time a small cold fusion device has been a MacGuffin which the story hinges upon. Cold fusion reactors are a part of the 𝐀𝐽C, according to the official Wasteland Survival Guide that came with Fallout 2, which is canon to the Fallout TV show because we literally see the page that describes this on screen here. Vault City had itself a cold fusion reactor that was straining to provide enough power for their settlement. So in other words, given there are hundreds of vaults by 2296, there are potentially hundreds of cold fusion reactors everywhere, and there have been for around 2 centuries. So what does this mean? Well, it means the entire plot-driving MacGuffin is just bunk. Why would Moldaver be trying so hard to find the cold fusion device when these things are literally in every settlement that ever used a 𝐀𝐽C to start its society? This includes Vault City, Arroyo, and a little-known place you might be familiar with called Shady Sands. This piece of information is the last of the Jenga pieces to be removed before the structural collapse of the entire premise of this show, a fitting contradiction to conclude with. 123. Ghoul Juice. Oh, hold on, I almost forgot Ghoul Juice. How silly of me. The Ghoul Juice, as we've unanimously decided to call it, seeing as the showrunners didn't think it important enough to give a name to such a narratively significant drug, is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, retcon in the series. It's so plainly obvious. A great big rotting elephant in the room. Even the shills can't ignore it, which makes sense, as it's so obviously a retcon that even the most casual Fallout player could pick up on it. Obviously, ghouls don't go feral if they don't use some special inhaler drug every 5 minutes. This has never once existed in the game, in any shape or any form, nor does any inhaler or any related inhaler cause ghoulification. From Fallout 1 to Fallout 4 and even Fallout 76, the canon has been clear as polished glass and solid as granite. Ghouls come from radiation and airborne FEV. Ghouls go feral as they get older. They lose their minds due to a combination of insanity and the degeneration of their bodies. In Fallout 2, the ghouls required constant medical attention to treat their slowly deteriorating bodies. Ghouls and even super mutants were slowly aging mentally and going senile. After Fallout 3, it was also suggested that high radiation could make ghouls go feral. At no point does a ghoul take a magic potion to stop it going feral. This was made up for the show to give Cooper a reason to sell Lucy for organs and turn Thaddeus into a ghoul. I sincerely doubt it's going to play much into Season 2 unless the writers want to use it as another Deus Ex Machina to make things happen. I doubt Season 2's ghoul juice will be consistent with what we've seen either. I mean, we didn't even get a name for it, or where it comes from. It's clear that the writers just flippantly invented a wrecking ball that demolished 30 years of lore for an excuse to send the characters on a side quest, which, frankly, you just have to stand back in awe of. They destroyed 30 years of lore just to piss about with the script. This won Best Adaptation. Look, am I losing my mind here? This won Best Adaptation, and it created, a a drug that it didn't even give a name or an origin of, that it just inserted into the story, and it came from nowhere, and it destroys basically the entire mechanics of a race that was there since the very original part of Fallout, like a species that's been there since the very first game, and we've known all about how it became a ghoul since the very first game, and we had 30 years of lore. 30 years of consistent lore. And it just did away with it. So it could make a joke. This one, best adaptation. How is this? And everyone loved it. And nobody talks about this. And it won best adaptation. And it... Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, here's another editor note. In the time I spent editing this script, I rewatched the show, and it has been as bad for my insanity as one would expect. But in the process, I found even more retcons. Retcons in this show are like rats. They're everywhere. And even when you think you've got all of them, there's always just a few more. So, without further ado, 124. The government did not sell the survival of humanity to the private sector, as Bud has just said here. Vault-Tec was a government contractor. Do you understand what that is, showrunners? It means under close government supervision. Vaults and FEV were government projects that they couldn't afford to be leaked to their enemy, the Chinese. A private company would be free. Vault-Tec would literally have to show the government everything they were doing, even cooperate with military and intelligence personnel who would be on site. That's why Roger Maxon was stationed with the scientists at Mariposa. So, in other words, while they were stuffing Budweiser's smooth brain into a vacuum cleaner and building up all of these cryopods, there was likely a CIA agent or an army officer sitting watching them, likely in disbelief. So, unless you would like to imply Vault-Tec somehow managed all of this in secret from the US government, from the Enclave? Yeah, I don't think so. 125. Vault-Tec's vaults aren't designed to keep a population alive for centuries. With the exception of Vault 101, all of the vaults had opened by Fallout 2. Fallout 2 takes place in 2241, so that's 164 years. This is around the time Vault 13 is given the all-clear by the Enclave, as its occupants were intended to be used for testing when needed. However, according to the Fallout Bible 0, Vault 13 was meant to stay closed for 200 years to test prolonged isolation, and yes, that was the experiment Bethesda would copy for Vault 101. Why did two vaults have the same experiment? Don't ask questions. Vault 15 was meant to open after 15 years, and 8, a control vault, was meant to open after 10. Some vaults were even meant to open after just 6 months. Bethesda added Vault 101 basically as a bunch of keys to jangle for older fans after they took over the franchise, and to provide a nice hour-long introductory playpen to impress the game reviewers that only played these games for 2 hours before giving it a 10 out of 10 badass seal of approval. But even there, all of the other vaults were already opened. The excuse used was that Vault 101 was intended on being closed indefinitely, but even in the Capital Wasteland, all the other vaults were already opened. The excuse used for 101 was that it was intended on being closed indefinitely. Also a convenient reason for why it wasn't given a GECK that was a MacGuffin for the entire plotline of Fallout 3, but that's besides the point. But wait, but if it was supposed to be closed indefinitely, then why would the door still be able to open? Never mind, don't ask questions. Vault 101 can't last any longer than 200 years anyways, as the Lone Wanderer explained to the Overseer Alphonse Almodovar, that the genetic pool of 101 would restrict it from going on any further than 200 years. Anyway, with that aside, it's clear that the vaults can only last up to about 200 years, but those ones that do and can are basically exceptional. Most only last decades. Therefore, the statement that all of our vaults are designed to last hundreds of years is false. This also implies Vault 4 and the interconnected vaults shouldn't exist. At the very least, Vault 4 shouldn't exist. It should be either struggling to maintain a non-inbred population or incredibly overpopulated. Vault 4 was only intended to last 5 years as a demonstration vault as well, so presumably it shouldn't have the resources to survive a decade, never mind over 200 years. Furthermore, where would they have gotten the resources for all this stuff for their bestiality experiments? Presumably it wasn't there to begin with, so in other words, yet more questions that need to be asked. 125. Count them. There is 125 contradictions between this show and the games, and I went easy. I didn't count the stupidity going on in Vault 32, 31, and 33, because it could be easily argued that these qualities such as casual incest were limited to these particular vaults. I didn't count any stupid statements like this, because they could merely be a clearly idiotic character's mistake. But still, we have 125 contradictions.
125 retcons, ranging from minor to absolutely universe-breaking. 125 slaps in the face, including the one that takes the very meaning, the core moral of this franchise, all it had left, and perverted it and twisted it until it was nothing more than a joke. 125, and these two walked up on stage with Ella Purnell on their leash, a talented actress whose talents have been wasted in the televised desecration of not one, but two video game franchises in what can only be called a genre of humiliation. And I should point out, only she and she alone had the self-awareness, the dignity to refuse the microphone. 125, and Jeff Keighley shook their hands, still wet with the blood of a franchise they did nothing to create. 125, and these two so-called men, without a single bit of shame, accepted an award for best adaptation on behalf of their pet showrunners, as they were too busy scouring what little remained of Black Isle's fallout. 125! And Christopher Nolan's idiot brother outright mocked the fans of New Vegas, boldly admitting they were destroying everything they loved on purpose, or at least they were aware of the damage they had done and felt no remorse, boasting of his crimes like a slasher taunting his next victim. 125, and this living justification for the razing of Hobbiton to the ground waddled on stage as fast as his stunts could carry him, and grasped with his little rat hands the award he desperately wished he was receiving for Starfield, and thanked the Fallout fans he had stabbed in the back by making this lore-demolishing show canon. 125, and the video game adaptation died that day to the sound of thunderous applause.
Now, I want you, after this entire video, to look me in the eye and tell me that you believe this show is a faithful adaptation of the Fallout franchise. Unless you can rectify all of the 125 lore contradictions I have just painstakingly described to you, you cannot honestly think this is a faithful adaptation, much less than the best adaptation. I'm sorry, but unless I am wrong 125 times, and I do not dismiss the possibility, then the problem is clearly not me, or the Fallout franchise, or even the writers of the Fallout TV show. No, the problem is with your perception, and frankly, I don't accept that. I don't accept your dismissal of these arguments on the basis that I am some Fallout elitist, or New Vegas fanboy, or whatever other derogatory term you've conjured to rob me of my humanity and devalue an argument you cannot hope to counter. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the true meaning behind war never changes. Because how can mankind possibly move forward as a species when it refuses to do so much as discuss something without prejudice, to peacefully engage in negotiation and compromise with their fellow man? So long as we continue to stubbornly hold on to our positions and refuse to challenge our own and others' beliefs, so long as we refuse to place our own survival and thriving as a species above our own petty tribal group, so long as we make disagreement a reason to demonize our opponents as less than human, less than ourselves, then our species is certainly set on a course for self-annihilation, and there is no hope.
There is no hope. Leave now. Leave while you still have
hope.
To summarize, this Fallout television adaptation is fundamentally in conflict with all the lore of previous Fallouts. It's clear the writers wanted to create their own vision of a post-apocalyptic action comedy irrespective of Fallout and its lore. They clearly had no intention of adapting Fallout, more so than of piggybacking off recognizable names and imagery to prop up their own unrelated story and world. It is a tale as old as time. When creating a new entry in an established franchise, you must work within the constraints of that which has came before, balancing the new with the old. You cannot have your cake and eat it. You can't have the advantage of a pre-established canon without respecting it. Hollywood is notorious for its disrespect towards video games, and so is it any surprise that they fail utterly to respect the pre-established canon of something they see as beneath them. The Fallout writers thought we were so stupid that we wouldn't notice, or so apathetic that we wouldn't care when they attempted to rewrite the entire world of Fallout. They set out to create their own story and invent a new lore that was absolutely contradictory to everything that came before. But lore never changes.
Whoa, easy there, easy. You've been out cold a couple of days now. Why don't you just relax a second? Get your bearings. Let's see what the damage is. How about your name? Can you tell me your name? I can't say it's what I'd have picked for you, but if that's your name, that's your name. I'm Doc Mitchell. Welcome to Goodsprings.